I worked as a waitress and part-time housekeeper at a remote hotel for longer than I care to admit. The kind of place tucked off a quiet highway, where the wallpaper peels just enough to hint at better days, and the air always smells faintly of damp carpet and industrial cleaner. The kind of hotel where people come to disappear, just for a night, or sometimes for good. Working in hospitality strips the glamour from it fast. You see people at their worst, blood on the sheets, screams behind locked doors, drunken sobbing at 3 a.m. And the messes, stains that no detergent can erase, not just on linens, but on your mind. Over time, you stop asking questions. You fold your empathy as tightly as the bedspreads and stack it neatly with the rest. But there was one morning I'll never forget, no matter how hard I try. It's burned into my memory like cigarette holes in the old armchairs of room 214. It was early, maybe around 5:30 a.m. The sky outside was still ink black, the sun not even flirting with the horizon yet. I was alone in the laundry room, buried in the deafening rumble of washers and dryers. It was one of those shifts where time dragged like molasses, and silence hung too thick in the air, interrupted only by the mechanical heartbeat of the machines. Normally, there's something comforting about the way a hotel slowly comes alive. Doors clicking shut. Guests checking out with sleepy eyes. The soft rumble of suitcase wheels tracing invisible paths down the faded carpeted halls. Muffled voices. Life. But not that morning. That morning, it was just me. And the machines. And a silence that felt wrong. I was folding bed sheets, stacking them into neat piles on the housekeeping cart, when I heard it. A noise. Faint at first. A dragging sound. Like someone pulling something heavy down the hallway. I froze. It wasn't the smooth roll of a suitcase. No. This sound was uneven. Jagged. Like rubber soles scuffing against worn carpet. Or worse, something limp being pulled across it. I held my breath and listened. Too early for guests to be leaving. No one was scheduled to check out that day until at least 8. And yet the noise continued, slow, irregular, and then it stopped. Just like that. I waited. Nothing. No voices. No footsteps. Just the dryer spinning and the low buzz of old fluorescent lights. I told myself it was probably one of the night porter's moving equipment. Maybe someone left something in the hallway again. Easy to dismiss. Hotels play tricks on your mind when they're quiet enough. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. I went back to folding, though my hands trembled slightly now. When the first official checkout finally came through, I had already loaded my cart halfway with towels and toiletries. I liked to be ahead of the chaos. It gave me a sense of control in a job that offered very little. But that morning, something was off. The halls stayed quiet longer than usual. No doors creaked open. No footsteps. Just that stillness again, so dense it pressed against your skin. And as I pushed the cart toward the rooms, I couldn't help but glance behind me. There was nothing there. But I swear, it felt like something had already passed. The sound I'd heard earlier, the dragging, kept playing in my head like a faint itch I couldn't scratch. Something felt off. I couldn't explain it, but every instinct in my body told me to stay alert. And then, just as I began to convince myself it had been nothing, it came again. Bang! A loud thud, sharp and jarring, like something heavy had been dropped just outside in the hallway. Or someone. I froze, mid-fold, the sheet slipping through my fingers onto the floor. I strained to listen, holding my breath. Bang! Bang! Again. Irregular. Disturbing. Not the rhythmic knock of luggage wheels or the playful thump of kids running through the halls. No, this was something else. Something wrong. I checked the time. 6:30 a.m. Still early, but late enough that guests should have been up and moving. Yet the hallway outside the laundry room was deathly quiet. I stepped out, poking my head into the corridor. It stretched long and narrow before me, bathed in the flickering amber light of a few dim overhead bulbs. The carpet muffled every sound. No footsteps. No voices. No movement. Except a pile of luggage. Several rooms down. It looked wrong. Unzipped suitcases sprawled open. Clothes spilling out onto the hallway floor like entrails. Shoes scattered. A makeup bag cracked open, its contents strewn like debris from an impact. But there was no one around. No guest. No porter. Nothing. I frowned. Guests sometimes left their bags out while waiting for rides, sure. But never like this. It looked rushed. Violent, even. As if someone had tried to flee but been stopped mid-motion. Where was the person who owned this luggage? I took a step forward, then stopped cold. A sound. Faint. A voice. Coming from a door cracked just slightly open, a few feet from the chaos. Room 212. The voice was barely audible, muffled and broken, like someone struggling to speak through a bad phone connection or underwater. I couldn't make out words, only fragments, tone without clarity. I hesitated. In all my years at that hotel, I'd seen things. Drunks passed out in the hallway. Couples screaming at each other so loudly the front desk had to intervene. Guests so disoriented they forgot their own room numbers. But this was different. That voice didn't sound drunk. Or angry. Or lost. It sounded wrong. Not slurred. Not sleepy. Just or broken. Like someone trying to form sentences without knowing how. Despite every instinct telling me to walk away, I moved toward the door. The thick carpet silenced my steps. The closer I got, the clearer the voice became. Still fragmented. Still off. Like someone dreaming. Or worse, like someone whose body and mind were no longer fully connected. I stopped just outside the door. The luggage at my feet was still scattered at strange angles, half packed, half forgotten. The door was open just enough for me to see a thin sliver of the room's interior. Shadows flickered inside. I knocked lightly. Room service. Is everything all right in there? No response. Just silence. Not peaceful silence. Heavy silence. Like the air itself was holding its breath. And then, the voice again. Louder. Closer. But twisted and distant at the same time, like a radio between stations. I couldn't understand what it was saying. But the sound of it, the way it scraped across my nerves, gave me chills that reached down to my bones. Something was very, very wrong. Slowly, hand trembling, I pushed the door open. It creaked on its hinges, resisting as if the room itself didn't want to be revealed. And what I saw stopped me cold. The room was a disaster zone. Clothes everywhere. One suitcase was overturned on the bed, its contents dumped in a messy heap on the floor. The curtains were drawn tightly shut, casting the entire space in a murky, sickly light that made everything look yellowed. Unnatural. It wasn't just messy, it was chaotic. Like someone had tried to escape. or survive. But that's not what froze me in place. No. It was her. Lying on the carpet, between the two queen beds, was a woman. Mid-40s, maybe. Her body twisted unnaturally. She wore a pale bathrobe, rumpled and soaked with sweat. She was moving, but not in any way a body should. Her limbs jerked at strange angles, convulsing and trembling like a marionette with tangled strings. Her hands scratched weakly at the carpet. Her head rolled back and forth, mouth opening and closing without words, her face contorted into a grimace of sheer pain or panic, or both. Her eyes were open, wide, blank, unblinking. I stood frozen in the doorway, watching her writhe and twitch in the dim, silent room. And in that moment, I couldn't tell if she was alive or something else entirely. Her mouth hung wide open in a frozen, silent scream. The kind of expression you only see in nightmares. I stood there, completely paralyzed, my brain scrambling to make sense of the scene in front of me. Was it a seizure? A stroke? I'd witnessed medical emergencies before, but this was different. The way her body contorted and jerked, it didn't look human. It didn't look natural. It was as if her limbs weren't responding to her will, like something else had hijacked her body. For a moment, I couldn't move. My instincts screamed at me to do something, call for help, run, grab someone, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. It was like being caught in the gravitational pull of something horrifying. Then I heard it. Movement. Frantic, erratic movement coming from the bathroom just a few feet away. I turned my head, and that's when I saw him. A man. Mid-40s, pale, unshaven, his button-up shirt half-tucked and wrinkled like he'd slept in it, or hadn't slept at all. His hair was wild and greasy, sticking out in all directions. He stood hunched over the sink, aggressively stuffing toiletries into a small travel bag. Toothbrushes, razors, prescription bottles, whatever his hands could grab. His fingers trembled with urgency, his shoulders jerking with every breath like he was on the edge of collapse. "Sir?" I managed, my voice barely louder than a whisper. "Sir, what's going on? Does she need help?" He didn't respond. He didn't even look at me. He just kept packing, eyes locked on the cluttered countertop as though his world had narrowed to just the items in front of him. Like acknowledging me, or her, would make something real that he wasn't ready to face. I took a cautious step forward, my heart beginning to pound. "Sir, your wife, she's having a seizure. Or something. She needs help." He spun around so fast I gasped. His eyes were wild, bloodshot and rimmed with dark circles. Sweat poured from his forehead. His face was gaunt, hollow, as if whatever had been inside him had been slowly draining away. His mouth hung open, breath ragged and shallow. We stared at each other. Then he looked past me, toward the woman still writhing on the floor. Back to me. His expression flickered, panic, yes, but also something darker. Something unhinged. "Get out," he growled, his voice low and raspy, like gravel dragged across concrete. "This doesn't concern you." I instinctively stepped back, my hands beginning to shake. "She needs medical attention," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You can't just leave her like that. I'm calling an ambulance." "No," he shouted suddenly, his voice cracking. He lunged forward, fists clenched. "No one's calling anyone." I flinched. My breath hitched in my throat. "She's fine," he barked. "She's fine, you hear me? Just leave us alone." I looked down at her. She wasn't fine. Her arms were still twitching violently, and now there were thin trails of blood on the carpet where she had scratched herself raw. Her nails had torn open the skin of her arms, leaving tiny red crescents. My chest tightened. I turned back to him. "She needs a hospital. I'm serious. She could die if..." I never finished the sentence. He charged. His body slammed into mine with brutal force, knocking the air out of my lungs. I stumbled backward, my shoulder hitting the doorframe hard enough to send pain shooting down my arm. And then his hands were around my neck. His fingers squeezed with terrifying strength, cutting off my air in seconds. My legs kicked. My nails dug into his wrists. My vision blurred at the edges. "You're not calling anyone," he growled, his face inches from mine, eyes blazing with desperation and fury. "This isn't your business." Panic consumed me. My thoughts scattered. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. But adrenaline took over. I thrashed, twisted, and somehow managed to elbow him in the ribs hard enough to loosen his grip. I shoved him backward with all the strength I had left. He staggered, nearly falling, but caught himself. His eyes locked onto mine again, and in that instant, I knew he wasn't done. I didn't wait. I ran. Out the door, into the hallway, barely touching the ground as I sprinted, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape my chest. Behind me, I heard him. Footsteps. Fast. Heavy. Gaining. The soft thud of carpet muted the chase, but I felt him. Close. Too close. I stumbled into the lobby, practically throwing myself behind the front desk like it was the only safe place left in the world. My chest heaved with shallow, broken breaths, and my legs felt like they might give out at any second. Catherine, the night receptionist, looked up from her monitor with wide, alarmed eyes as I collapsed against the counter. "Catherine," I gasped, clutching the edge for balance. "Call the police." She stood up straight, instantly alert. I could barely form the words. "There's a man. He's dangerous." "His wife." I choked on the next breath. "Just call. Now." She didn't hesitate. Her fingers flew across the buttons on the desk phone as she dialed 911, her voice rising in pitch and urgency. I slid down the wall behind the desk, my back pressed against the cool plaster, legs curled to my chest like I could somehow shrink away from what had just happened. I heard Catherine's voice in the distance, relaying what I told her to the emergency dispatcher. But the words barely registered. They sounded muffled, like I was underwater. All I could focus on was the echo of that man's eyes, wild, haunted, and the phantom grip of his hands still burning into my neck. And her. That woman. Twisting on the floor, her body betraying her, her fingers raw and bloody. I waited for him to come charging into the lobby. I was sure he would. Screaming. Raging. Ready to finish what he'd started. But he didn't come. The hallway beyond the lobby remained eerily still. Minutes dragged by like hours. Every creak, every subtle shift in the building's frame sent a jolt through me. I kept staring down the corridor, breath caught in my throat, expecting him to appear in that yellow glow at any moment. Catherine eventually hung up the phone, her face pale and drawn. "They're on their way," she said, her voice trembling. We huddled together behind the desk, both of us flinching at every tiny noise. A door creaked somewhere down the hall. A vent clicked to life. Each sound sent adrenaline crashing through my veins. And then, finally, Red and blue lights fluttered through the lobby windows. The police had arrived. What followed was a blur of movement and chaos. Uniforms storming through the entrance. Radios crackling. Sharp questions flying. Flashlights and holstered weapons. I barely processed any of it. I told them everything. What I'd seen, what he'd done, what I feared. My voice trembled through the whole recounting, but the words came. The officers listened with grim focus, then nodded. Then they moved. 3 of them headed down the hallway toward room 212, weapons drawn. Catherine and I stayed behind the desk, gripping each other's hands like children hiding from a monster under the bed. They disappeared around the corner. Silence followed. A suffocating, horrible silence. I held my breath. My thoughts spiraled. What if he'd already fled? What if she was? A shout. One of the officers. Loud, commanding, followed by the crash of movement, a scuffle. The sounds of a struggle, something crashing, a shout of resistance. Muffled yelling. Then it went quiet again. Just long enough to make my skin crawl. And then they came into view. 2 officers were dragging him into the lobby. The man from room 212. His wrists were locked in cuffs behind his back, his arms twisted awkwardly, his face twisted in rage. He fought them with every step, his body jerking and flailing like a man possessed. His feet dragged, resisting even as they hauled him forward. But it was his face that haunted me most. It wasn't just anger, it was something else. A kind of chaos burning behind his bloodshot eyes. A fury that didn't belong to someone fully aware of what they'd done. Or maybe it did. Maybe that was the scariest part. He didn't scream. He didn't beg. He just stared, straight at me, as they pulled him past. And in that look, I saw it again. The same cold darkness I'd felt in that room. The same madness that had twisted his wife's body and made him believe no one should help her. And somehow, I knew this wasn't over. Not really. His face was twisted with rage, mouth half open as if he wanted to scream but had forgotten how. His eyes darted wildly around the room, erratic, unfocused, frantic. For a second, I thought he was staring at me, but his gaze drifted past without locking on, searching for something that wasn't there. And then he began to murmur. Low, feverish words spilled from his lips in a constant stream. I couldn't make them out, some muttered chant or manic whisper, like a song only he could hear. His head lolled to the side, his hair damp and tangled with sweat. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, and his hands were smeared with something. Dark. Sticky. It might have been blood. The officers dragged him through the lobby, toward the flashing blue and red lights outside. He didn't resist anymore. Just kept muttering. His body limp, like he'd given up, or like something had slipped loose inside him. Even as they loaded him into the back seat of the squad car, his lips never stopped moving. Whatever nightmare he was in, he was still trapped in it. Only when the door slammed shut and the patrol car pulled away did I let out a long, shaky breath. My legs buckled slightly, and I slid down against the front desk. The tension hadn't left my chest. It was all over now, but my body didn't believe it. Is she? I tried to ask, but my voice cracked. I couldn't finish the sentence. The words caught in my throat like splinters. One of the officers, an older man with silver at his temples and deep lines across his forehead, approached quietly. She's alive, he said, almost gently. Looks like a seizure. EMTs are checking her out now. I nodded slowly, unsure if I felt relieved, or just hollow. And him? I asked. The officer's expression darkened. His, completely gone, he said after a pause. When we got there, he was pacing back and forth in the middle of the room, just talking to himself. Didn't even look up at us. Just kept mumbling and stuffing things into a bag like he was late for a flight. My stomach turned. I could see it. Her, convulsing on the floor, blood on her arms. And him, packing like she didn't even exist. He told me, I whispered, more to myself than to the officer. He told me to leave. Said it wasn't my business. But I couldn't just leave her there. The officer gave a tight nod. You did the right thing, he said. You probably saved her life. I looked back down the hallway, toward room 212. The door was still ajar. From here, it looked just like every other door in the hotel. But I knew better now. Something awful had happened behind that door. Something that shattered a man's mind, and nearly cost a woman her life. I stood there, staring down the corridor as if expecting the darkness inside that room to ripple outward, to creep toward me across the faded carpet. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't opened that door. I don't want to know. There's something about hotels, something inherently eerie. Even the nicest ones feel temporary. Hollow. Like they're not meant to hold anyone too long. No roots. No permanence. Just passing ghosts. Over the years, I've stayed in dozens of them. Sales job. City after city. Same numbers, different faces. Fast food at 10 p.m, the smell of cleaning chemicals and fake lemon in the air, lonely television static in generic rooms that blur together. You get used to it after a while. You get numb. But sometimes, just sometimes, something happens that makes you stop and think. That makes you realize how thin the line is between routine and nightmare. Between normal and something else. That night at the hotel, room 212, it reminded me of that. Some rooms are better left unopened. And some doors, once you step through them, you never truly come back.